Have you ever wondered, what is the final moment a human being truly longs for each day? It's not a delicious meal, nor a grand gift, it's a gentle gaze, a peaceful afternoon, and someone willing to sit beside you, with no reason at all. If you love stories that make your heart pause for a few beats, hit the subscribe button for Heart Glow, a channel where every story carries a soft light of kindness and humanity. And now, please listen to Sunset on the Rooftop in San Diego, a story about a final promise, an afternoon that would never come again, and a place where sunsets became healing medicine for souls nearing the end of life's journey. In a quiet corner of the coastal city of San Diego, there stood an old nursing home tucked against the cliffs overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Here, a young woman named Emma, 26 years old, began each day with a white apron, neatly tied hair, and eyes full of tenderness. Emma wasn't the best nurse in the facility. She once confessed she was clumsy with needles and a little awkward when taking blood pressure, but she had a gift no medical book could teach: the ability to listen with her whole heart. Emma grew up in a home where her grandmother lived with the family. Since she was little, she had been familiar with the rustling wind through old stories, each wrinkle on her grandmother's face telling an entire lifetime. When her grandmother passed away, Emma knew exactly what she wanted to do: to pass on the gentleness her grandmother once gave her, to the elderly, to the hearts walking through the final winter of their lives. The nursing home where Emma worked was nothing special: long hallways, a faint smell of disinfectant, the sound of TV playing with no one watching. But Emma discovered something different. On the 5th floor, there was a small rooftop terrace where one could watch the entire sunset blaze across the sky each evening. From the first time she stepped up there, Emma felt she had found a shelter amidst the fatigue of her work. After every shift, she often brought a cup of tea, a book, and simply sat there, watching the sun sink into the ocean, her heart as light as the waves below. She never told anyone about this private haven, partly because she wanted to preserve its peace, and partly because she feared people would think she was too dreamy. But she had no idea that right there, in that silent golden hour, a strange journey was about to begin, one that would connect two souls who seemed separated by generations, but who would meet at the intersection of memory, affection, and all the things left unsaid. Among the list of residents Emma cared for, one name always stood out: William Crawford, 84 years old. He had been at the nursing home for over a year, yet in all that time, no one had heard him say more than 3 sentences. He lived quietly in room 204, always wearing dark sweaters, silver-rimmed glasses, and often sat by the window for hours, as if waiting for something beyond the horizon. There were days Emma walked past and saw him sitting motionless, his gaze seeming to pierce through the city, the ocean, to a place far beyond anyone's reach. Some nurses said he was difficult. Others whispered that he had lost someone deeply important, and since then, had no desire to open his heart to anyone. But Emma felt something else. She believed that behind that silence was an ocean of untold stories. One early day in March, when the sky turned a soft shade of pink-orange, Emma was arranging books in the activity room when William suddenly appeared behind her. He didn't knock. He didn't ask permission. He just stood for a long moment and then asked in a hoarse but gentle voice, "Young lady, is there a rooftop here?" Emma was momentarily surprised. She turned around and nodded. "Yes, it's on the 5th floor. But not many people go up there." William didn't say anything more. But in his eyes, it wasn't the gaze of a forgetful old man, but the look of someone trying to find his way back to a place long forgotten. A faint and distant light flickered in his expression, and it was that light that made Emma decide, tomorrow, she would take him there. The next afternoon, when the clock struck 4, Emma knocked on the door of room 204. William was sitting by the window as usual, but his eyes were no longer lost. there was something in them that looked like quiet anticipation. I brought chamomile tea and ginger cookies. Emma smiled. I thought they'd go well with the sunset. William nodded softly, then slowly stood up. His legs trembled, but they were steady. Emma gently helped him to the elevator, and together they stepped onto the rooftop on the 5th floor, where the breeze was soft and the sun was gently lowering itself into the distant sea. The old man took a deep breath. A warm orange-pink light washed over his aged face, and Emma saw, for the first time, that he smiled. Not a polite or practiced smile, but a real one, unfolding from a memory that had just returned, this place. It's a lot like another rooftop, William said quietly. In 1962, I proposed to my wife on a rooftop just like this. High above, looking out at the sea, on a quiet golden afternoon. She wore a white sweater. And I was shaking so hard I almost dropped the ring onto the sidewalk below. He chuckled, for the first time in years. His voice was deep and even, like an old song playing again. Emma said nothing, just poured tea and listened. Every word he spoke was like a piece of memory falling onto the table, forming a picture of an old love, full of tenderness and longing. From that day on, the rooftop on the 5th floor was no longer Emma's quiet little corner. It became a daily ritual, rooftop hour, as William jokingly called it. Emma always brought hot tea, a few cookies, and a light wool blanket to cover his legs when the wind came in strong. Each afternoon, under the soft orange of the sinking sun, William told stories of his life, his vibrant college days at Yale, long years of teaching philosophy, the brutal months of war overseas. He spoke of his wife, Eleanor, a woman with gray-blue eyes and a voice like a French melody. He talked about his son, Henry, smart but stubborn, who studied abroad and became successful, but also very distant, and then, he spoke about the one thing no one dared to mention, Eleanor's death. She passed away from a stroke in the winter of 2018, while they were watching the snow fall from their porch. Since then, William had closed his heart. He stopped teaching, stopped writing, and stopped letting anyone in. Emma didn't interrupt. She simply sat there, hands wrapped around her cup of tea, eyes watching the sun fall gently into the sea. She understood, not everyone is lucky enough to have a love like that. And even fewer are brave enough to keep it alive inside, even after the other person is gone. Soon, Emma and William's sunset talks were no longer a secret. Other residents at the home, who mostly stayed in their rooms or the dining hall, began to get curious when they noticed a change in William. He was less withdrawn, eating better, even once nodding at a nurse, something that was considered unheard of there. A lady named Rosa was the first to ask Emma, "I heard there are ginger cookies and a gentleman on the rooftop who tells stories like the radio?" Emma laughed, "Would you like to come up with me?" And little by little, every afternoon, someone new would join. Some days it was Mr. George with his old flute. Other days, it was Miss Linda with a box of black and white photos. They gathered on plastic chairs, sipping tea and sharing stories they thought they'd forgotten, first loves, missed trains from 1969, farewell parties from college. Some cried. Some laughed. But more importantly, they came alive again. The rooftop on the 5th floor, once forgotten, was now the Sunset Club, a place where memories were dusted off, and growing old no longer meant growing lonely. One evening, when only Emma and William remained and the sun had dipped fully below the horizon, he turned to her and said, very slowly, "You know, Emma, I spent my whole life teaching about the philosophy of living, about human value. And yet, I realized I had never truly lived. until I started telling you my stories." Emma was silent. That didn't sound like a compliment. It sounded like a goodbye. "After Eleanor died," he continued, "everything inside me died too. Henry, my son, never understood why I became so rigid, so cold. But the truth is, I just didn't know how to go on living without her. Until I saw you, a young girl, a stranger, who looked at me like I still had something worth sharing. Thank you for helping an old man, with one foot in the grave, come alive one more time." Emma held his hand tightly. She didn't say anything, there was no need, that sunset was beautiful. As if the sky itself wanted to hold on to that moment just a little longer. If this story has touched your heart, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next inspiring tale. At Heart Glow, we share stories of kindness, transformation, and the precious lessons life offers. Be part of this loving community and help us spread messages of hope and humanity. On September afternoons, the air in San Diego began to grow crisp, and William's footsteps gradually became slower. Emma started noticing that he leaned on the railing a little longer, sometimes letting out a dry cough between stories. Still, he persisted in going up to the rooftop every evening. Each of his steps seemed to carry the weight of a lifetime. Emma once suggested he rest for a day, but William just smiled and replied in his soft, raspy voice, "As long as I can see the sun set, I want to keep telling stories." That sentence etched itself into Emma's heart. It wasn't just a refusal, it was a declaration of his love for life, and his determination to live each remaining moment to the fullest. That evening on the rooftop, Emma brought 2 light wool shawls to wrap around their shoulders, brewed hot ginger tea, and carefully sliced the cookies he liked. William looked at her and nodded, as if he knew she understood what was coming, and accepted it, not with fear, but with love. The sunset that evening wasn't golden, but a pale orange tinged with purple, like a soft blanket gently draping over the city. Emma knew that any sunset could be the last. And with each one, she quietly listened to him, not just his life stories, but fragments of memories he entrusted to her, as though leaving behind little stones to mark the path he had walked. That day, it rained, a rare shower in San Diego's dry season. Raindrops tapped gently against the windowpane, drawing long streaks of water like silent tears. Emma knew William would be saddened if he couldn't go up to the rooftop, so she prepared apple pie and brought it to his room as usual. But William simply gazed out the window and softly said, "Maybe we can go to the hallway." Emma was taken aback, but she understood when he pointed to the small chair by the hallway window facing west. She helped him sit down, placed a cushion behind his back, and then sat beside him in silence. They watched the rain fall, watched the light blur through the curtain of water. No sun, no brilliant orange glow as usual, but there was something serene, something tender. William gently held Emma's hand, his eyes not sorrowful, but deeply peaceful. "Beauty doesn't need to be seen, it lives in memory," he said. Emma turned to him, her throat tight. That sentence echoed like a final lesson, that even when we can no longer witness beauty with our eyes, we can still hold it in our hearts, where the light never fades. One afternoon, when the sun came out again, William sat longer than usual. He didn't tell a story like he normally did, he just stared out at the sea. Emma sensed something different, not sadness, but a quiet preparation. William reached into his pocket and took out a small envelope, pale yellow with a green-stitched border. His hand trembled slightly as he passed it to her. "Emma," he said, "keep this. But don't open it. Not until I'm gone." Emma looked at him, her eyes red with emotion, but she said nothing. She nodded. She knew this moment was a kind of ritual, a farewell without words. William placed his frail hand over hers, his eyes filled with deep gratitude. "Thank you for giving me the most beautiful afternoons of my life." No more words were exchanged. They simply sat there in the slanted glow of the setting sun, like two souls at peace amidst the chaos of life. Emma held the letter tightly in her hand. She knew, the most precious treasure isn't money, but feelings written in ink and heart. That morning, the nursing home felt unusually calm. Gentle sunlight streamed through the windows, dancing on the leaves outside. Emma went to William's room as usual, bringing his favorite cup of tea and a piece of toast. She knocked softly, but there was no response. She stepped in, and saw him lying there peacefully, as if he were just sleeping. No more coughing, no more distant gaze, just a face at ease, serene. In his hand, he still held the embroidered handkerchief with the sunset she had once made for him. She walked closer, knelt beside the bed, and wept silently. She didn't cry out. She simply stayed quiet. In her heart, William was still sitting on the rooftop, telling stories of his youth, holding his wife's hand in the golden afternoon, softly chuckling when the tea turned cold. He had left, but not alone. He left with a memory full of color, and the one who witnessed his final sunsets was her. William's funeral was simple, just as he had wished. No grand floral arrangements, no solemn speeches. Just the old men and women who had once sat beside him on the rooftop, laughed at his funny tales, and gone silent at his poignant memories. Emma stood quietly beside a small table with his photo, a picture of him smiling in the sunset, his eyes seeming to tell a story without speaking. She held the letter in her hand, curiosity rising in her chest, but she did not open it. His words still echoed in her ears, "Only when I'm gone." She believed the right moment to read it would come. But not today. Today was to say goodbye, to a storyteller, a friend, a great soul. The rooftop was empty that day. But in Emma's heart, 100 stories were still echoing. As the funeral neared its end, a middle-aged man quietly stepped forward. He wore a plain white shirt, simple jeans, and looked nothing like someone of importance. But his eyes, full of sorrow and regret, caught Emma's attention. He approached, resting his hand on the table where William's photo lay. Then he looked at Emma and said softly, "You must be Emma." "I'm Matthew, William's son." Emma was surprised. She had always thought William had no family left. And now, a piece of him stood right in front of her. Matthew hesitated, as though he wanted to say so much but didn't know where to begin. "My father once meant everything to me. But we grew apart over the years. Work, disagreements, little things. And then the silence took over." His voice broke. Emma didn't judge him, nor did she ask questions. She simply placed a hand on the letter in her coat pocket, the letter William had entrusted to her. Perhaps, part of the answer was written inside. Emma sat quietly in her small room, holding the letter William had written. The golden envelope had faded with time. She gazed at the carefully written words, each one seemed to hold a piece of his soul. The lines in the letter were not just parting thoughts from a man about to leave this world, but the hidden confessions of a heart that had never spoken its truth. William wrote about his regrets in the relationship with his son, a love that had never found its way into words. He spoke of his late wife and the sweet memories of the sunsets they used to watch together. In the letter, He shared his belief that sunsets, no matter how fleeting, could still mend what was broken, and heal the wounds that linger in the human heart. Every word in the letter felt like a gentle touch to Emma's heart. She couldn't help but feel his loneliness, but also, a warm hope, a wish that the final moments of his life wouldn't be empty or meaningless. The letter was more than just a message, it was a spiritual gift. Not only for Emma, but for all those elderly souls whose rich pasts now only lived on in memory. She sighed, her eyes slightly red, placing the letter down on the table as she sat in stillness, reflecting on the words he had left behind. Emma continued reading, her eyes drifting toward the final line of the letter. It ended with a shocking message: use this to create a place where weary hearts still have room to dream when the sun goes down. She frowned slightly, not understanding it right away. She went back and read the line again, feeling an odd warmth radiate from the words. It wasn't until she glanced down to the bottom of the letter that she realized William had left her a portion of his estate. Not for her to spend, but to build something greater, a place not only for the elderly, but a place where they could rediscover joy, where dreams long forgotten could rise again. Emma's heart pounded. Everything was so sudden, so unexpected. She was just an ordinary girl, working at a nursing home where every afternoon was filled with silence and the sound of waves outside the window. She had nothing but an open heart and the care she gave to the elderly. And now, a man who had left this world had entrusted her with his greatest hope. That trust felt like a glowing lantern lighting her path, but it was also heavy, so heavy she didn't know what to do with it. A large inheritance, tied to a profound mission. She asked herself if she was capable. Did she have the strength to fulfill his dream? Emma was still overwhelmed when Matthew sat beside her, suddenly opening up in a way he never had before. He revealed that he was a billionaire, the founder of a major tech corporation, with a legacy of groundbreaking achievements. He spoke of his career, of how he had built a vast tech empire, but then he admitted something that caught her by surprise, that despite all his wealth, he hadn't truly felt rich until he heard Emma talk about the afternoons when his father smiled. Everything he had built, the companies, the money, it all seemed meaningless compared to the simple moments his father had lived. He looked at Emma, his eyes heavy with emotion, as if he were searching for something the world could never give him. Those afternoons when my father told stories, those quiet smiles. They're what I truly long for. This fortune, no matter how large, cannot compare to what my father left behind. Matthew sighed deeply. I never thought I'd find someone like you. Emma, you gave my father his final joy. Matthew's words allowed Emma to understand something even deeper in the story, something she had never known. Matthew wasn't just a distant, cold billionaire. He was a man with a warm heart, searching for the true meaning of life. Matthew looked into Emma's eyes, determination shining within his gaze, and gently invited her to join him in building the Sunset House. The Sunset House wouldn't be just another retirement home, it would be a final haven for the elderly, a place where they could not only watch the sunset but rediscover joy, love, and peace in the final chapters of their lives. Emma sat in stunned silence, unsure of what to say. The proposal was too immense, too surreal to believe. But as she looked into Matthew's eyes, she realized he wasn't joking. She thought of William, of those quiet afternoons on the rooftop, sharing stories and silences, of the promises he left behind. She remembered the silent tears, the moments that no amount of wealth or fame could ever replicate. I want to do this, Matthew said, as though the decision had already been made in his heart long ago. I want to create a place where people like my father, people who lived their lives loving, can live fully in their final days. Emma felt herself being swept into something far bigger than herself. She couldn't say no. "We have to do this," she said, her voice firm yet tinged with fear. Could she really be strong enough to carry this through? Could she keep the promise to William and help Matthew build the place he envisioned? Doubt and anxiety swirled inside her. She wasn't someone with experience in leading grand projects like this. It all felt too big, too beyond her. But when she looked up toward the rooftop, the very space that had once held warm afternoons and shared memories, something strong stirred in her chest. That rooftop, now quiet and empty, still echoed with the stories of days gone by. She remembered William's glowing eyes when he spoke of his late wife, the soft smile on his face as they watched the sun sink into the horizon together. She knew that if she didn't honor his wish, if the Sunset House never came to life, those memories would begin to fade. And with them, the meaning behind them. She couldn't let him go without creating a place where his stories could live on. "I'll do it," Emma whispered, a quiet but firm resolve blooming inside her. "We'll do it." With purpose in their hearts, Emma and Matthew began planning the Sunset House. They searched for a seaside location, not just for its beauty, but for the peace it could offer to aging souls nearing the twilight of their lives. They chose a plot of land with golden sands and gentle breezes drifting in from the ocean. A spacious rooftop was designed to serve as a daily sanctuary for watching the sunset, an emotional cornerstone of the home spirit. At the heart of the building, they envisioned a memory library, where every corner would echo with life stories and past joys. A music room, where soft melodies could soothe weary hearts. And a tea corner, where laughter, connection, and rediscovered affection would fill the air. Nothing would exist there except warmth and humanity, a place where the setting sun would not bring sadness, but be the last light to love by. Emma and Matthew knew they had found the true meaning of life, to create a place. A home, for the elderly, a place where they could continue to dream and love until their very last breath. If this story touches your heart, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next inspiring stories. At Heart Glow, we share stories of kindness, transformation, and the invaluable lessons that life has to offer. Be a part of this loving community and help us spread positivity, one story at a time. Emma and Matthew spent weeks walking the streets, passing by vacant lots and abandoned buildings, in search of the perfect location for their heartfelt project. During those journeys, Emma felt her heart grow heavier, not just because building a house was important, but because they needed to find a place with a soul, just as William had once said. After countless visits to expensive neighborhoods and overly modern sites that didn't match the spirit of their mission, they finally came upon an old plot of land that used to be a movie theater, nestled near the ocean. It was a place with depth, echoing the grandeur of a forgotten past, and Emma felt an instant connection unlike anything before. She didn't just want to build something beautiful and functional, she wanted to create a place filled with memories, with the silent stories of people who had lived long, meaningful lives. When Matthew saw the light in Emma's eyes, he understood that this wasn't just another construction project, it was a place to craft memories. A place where the elderly could feel love and care. A place where no one would be forgotten, even in the final chapters of their lives. The true challenge of building something meaningful didn't lie in bricks or concrete, it lay in the unpredictable battles along the way. Emma never imagined how difficult it would be once the project truly began. The legal procedures seemed endless. Construction permits were delayed, and to make things worse, a group of local residents protested against their project, claiming that a senior care home near the beach would lower property values in the area. Faced with community resistance and mounting costs, Emma felt like everything was slowly slipping out of her control. Sleepless nights, tense meetings with contractors and city officials, mountains of paperwork, all of it left her nearly drained. But every time she felt like giving up, when the burdens felt too overwhelming, she thought of William's smile. That smile, always glowing with an unwavering belief in life's purpose and in the things that truly matter. She remembered what he said the very first time they met: one person may not change the world, but they can change someone's world. And that is already something big. Those words became her light in the darkness, and she couldn't give up, not just for herself, but for everyone who believed in Twilight Home. Though he was the one handling the finances, Matthew, too, often felt exhausted and shaken by the criticism he faced from the media. People mocked him for spending money on the dying, as if he were throwing away a fortune on a hopeless cause. Matthew, someone who had long lived in the dazzling world of business, couldn't help but dwell on those harsh words. There were moments when he questioned whether he was on the right path at all, but then he remembered what his father used to say, that life wasn't about accumulating wealth, but about creating real change in the community. He thought back to the times they sat together, his father speaking of sunsets, of how the sun sets slowly, bringing a peaceful beauty, a signal of the end, but also the moment when life's most beautiful light shines. Matthew began to understand that his father had chosen Twilight as a sanctuary for the elderly, not just for its beauty, but because it symbolized peace and hope in life's final moments. He realized that while this project might not be easy, it carried an invisible value, the value of kindness and love that we give to one another. Throughout the construction process, Emma and Matthew had the opportunity to meet many elderly people who lived in solitude, some of whom hadn't had visitors in a long time. Their life stories slowly began to unfold. One day, while Emma was working with the construction crew on the rooftop, an elderly woman with silver-white hair walked in. She introduced herself as Rose, 92 years old, and had lived alone for the past 30 years. Emma listened to her story, from the youthful days full of dreams to the loneliness she experienced in her later years. Each story felt like a part of the bricks that made up the foundation of the Sunset home. Rose's story made Emma even more determined. Every elderly person they met carried a treasure trove of memories, lives that had endured many struggles but were also filled with joy and love. Each story was a reminder that we all have a youth, and the most important thing is the memories we leave behind in this world. One afternoon, as the project was nearing completion, a sudden storm hit, sweeping everything in its path. The newly built rooftop was severely damaged. Emma stood amidst the rubble, tears falling from her eyes. She felt as though all her efforts had been in vain, like a shattered dream. But just as Emma was about to give up, Grandma Rose came to her, gently patted her shoulder, and said, "Don't be sad, storms come to remind us to appreciate the sunny days." These words were gentle, but profound. The storm was not only a challenge for the construction but also a lesson in patience, in recognizing the value of things that may seem simple yet are incredibly important in life. Finally, after many hardships, the Sunset Home project was completed. The rooftop had now become a dreamlike space, with comfortable wooden chairs facing the sea, vibrant paper flower paintings adorning the walls, and a storytelling room filled with life stories. A picture of William was placed at the entrance, with the caption underneath, "Where the sunset meets the human heart." This was a place where the elderly could find peace in their final days, where they could share their stories and continue to be loved. Emma and Matthew stood together on the rooftop, gazing out at the vast sea. They knew that no matter where life took them, they had created something truly special, a home where the sunset was not just an end, but the beginning of a journey filled with love. When the House of Sunset opened its doors, it was not just a place of shelter, but a new space where everything was reborn from love and listening. With this transformation, Emma didn't just build a roof for the elderly, but also created a new stage for them, where they were no longer just elderly people fading away in society's memory, but storytellers, individuals carrying inspiring stories about life. Every evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, elderly men and women from all over were brought in. Not to rest or treat illness, but to embark on a spiritual journey, to share their life stories. These stories could be about the beautiful days of youth, the bitter moments in life, or the people they had loved and lost. No one here was seen as a patient or elderly. They were all the special storytellers of every evening. In that space, the sunset not only illuminated the sky but also shone into the hearts of each person, awakening beautiful memories and sacred emotions they had never been allowed to express before. Each evening, as the sun slowly set and the sky turned to warm orange, Emma would organize sunset storytelling sessions. This was not just a recreational activity, but an essential part of the elderly's lives. The stories they shared weren't canned tales, but vivid, emotional memories, expressed with all their hearts. Each one of them, no matter their age or health, had their own story, and those stories helped them be reborn in the light of the sunset. One elderly woman shared the first time she fell in love, the excitement of holding someone's hand for the first time, a feeling both strange and sweet. An elderly man recalled the war years when he was away from his family, yet met a special friend in tough times, a friend who helped him overcome every challenge. Stories of love, loss, happiness, and pain filled the air. Laughter and tears blended, like the notes of a life symphony. Each story was a mark of time, and every evening was a journey to the past, where people could recall the most beautiful things they had ever had. At the House of Sunset, stories weren't only told through words but also through artistic activities. An elderly man, though no longer able to see light, could still play the piano with a magical finesse, thanks to his memories. Each note he played wasn't just a sound, but a piece of his life, old memories his hands had remembered for years. Nearby, an elderly woman who had once been a ballet dancer, now struggling with age-related pain, could still dance, albeit slower and more gently. Her movements weren't as they used to be, but her grace and resilience created a beautiful image in everyone's heart. Every evening, these elderly men and women didn't need an audience to shine, for they had found joy within themselves. The House of Sunset became their final stage, a place without spotlights or onlookers, but filled with stories, music, and dances full of emotion and freedom. Every evening that passed, each person was part of the play of their own life. Without needing recognition from others, only knowing they had lived fully with passion and love, Matthew began to become an essential part of the House of Sunset. No longer the cold billionaire focused only on numbers and profits, he found a part of himself in the stories of the elderly. Every visit, he listened to tales that reminded him of his father, a simple man but full of love. His father had always been a huge source of encouragement during his upbringing, and now, through the stories of the elderly, Matthew felt he was reconnecting with the things he had forgotten. Every story of love, family, and the struggles of life awakened him. He realized that the important things in life weren't material possessions, but the small moments, the simple emotions his father had always taught him to cherish. Thanks to the House of Sunset, Matthew found his father's spirit in the stories of the elderly, and he understood that, even as a billionaire, he still needed to learn to love and be grateful for life like a true son. One day, after a storytelling session had just finished, a 12-year-old volunteer with bright eyes and enthusiasm asked Emma a question that made her think long and hard. when I grow up, can I live here? Emma smiled, but the question made her heart tighten. She looked at the little girl with affection and replied, "Only when you have many wonderful stories to tell." This answer wasn't just advice but also a way for Emma to encourage the girl to seek out stories in her own life. Stories don't always come easily, but they will appear when we live fully and keep exploring. Emma knew that, even though the girl was young, there was already a burning fire in her heart, and one day, she would have special stories to share with everyone at the House of Sunset. After months of living in the beautiful space of the House of Sunset, Emma decided to write about her journey. She gathered the stories, emotions, and everything she had experienced since beginning the project. She named the book Where the Sun Touches the Heart, to capture all the special moments she had witnessed, from the elderly stories, genuine friendships, to the magical moments life had brought. She sent the book to Mr. William, the man who started everything with a simple question: "Is there a rooftop?" That very question had changed Emma's life and the lives of those in the House of Sunset. The story of Mr. William and the House of Sunset wasn't just a story of a shelter, but a story of love, of what we can give to one another. And about the change each person can bring to this world. That day, the Sunset House became more special than ever. The wooden chairs sat silently, neatly arranged on the rooftop where every sunset could be admired. But today, the atmosphere was heavy with loss, with the longing for Mr. William. People from all over gathered here, not just to watch the sunset, but to remember him. One by one, they brought stories of him, small, simple stories, yet filled with meaning. Some shared memories of the times he helped them in difficult moments, others recalled afternoons when he would sit on the wooden chairs, quietly gazing into the distance as if searching for something only he could understand. One by one, they stood up, sharing, remembering him, the man who created not just a space for people to sit, but also a space for souls to find peace. Their stories were small pieces in the larger picture Mr. William had painted, a place where love and listening were never lacking. No one needed to speak too much, for all understood that these stories were not just about remembering the past, but about keeping the flame of the Sunset House burning bright, continuing to light up the souls of the lonely and those craving to be heard. Matthew stood up, his gaze directed towards the wooden chair placed near William's photo. He had always been a quiet man, rarely expressing his emotions. But today he couldn't stay silent. A gentle breeze blew across the rooftop, as if trying to soothe the pain in everyone's hearts. "I used to think my father chose to live alone because he didn't need anyone. But it turns out, he just needed someone to listen." Matthew began, his voice choked, a bit dry but very sincere. He recalled the last years of his father's life, when he no longer had the strength to engage in social activities but still wanted to live alone, in a small house, going up to the rooftop by himself to watch the sunset. Matthew had thought his father chose that life because he didn't want anyone to bother him, because he no longer wanted the noise of the world. But as Matthew reflected, he realized a painful truth: his father wasn't alone because he didn't need anyone, but because he simply wanted one person to listen, someone willing to understand him, to share his thoughts and feelings without words. Just one person who understood his silence was enough. And when he shared this with everyone, he felt like he was passing on a part of his father's soul to them all, a way to keep him alive in their hearts and in the hearts of others. Everyone was silent, listening, because they understood that sometimes presence and listening are the most precious gifts we can give one another. After Matthew finished sharing, Emma stood up. She walked toward the wooden chair that William used to sit in every afternoon. Once again, she felt the silence enveloping the surroundings. Gently, she took the chair outside and placed it beside his photo. She bent down, looking at the picture, her eyes shimmering with deep emotion, as if he were still sitting there, gazing at the sunset with a look of understanding. Emma softly said, "Even if no one sits there anymore, we leave it here, for love doesn't need anyone to replace it." She placed her hand on the wooden chair, as if to convey a message, a feeling she knew couldn't be put into words. This wooden chair, although no one would sit in it anymore, still held a deep meaning, not just as a place to sit, but as a symbol of presence. Emma understood that the love Mr. William had given to everyone could never be replaced. That love wasn't something that could be substituted by any action or event. It was something enduring and eternal, preserved in memories and in the hearts of everyone who had known him. Everyone stood silently, their eyes all directed toward the wooden chair, as if agreeing with Emma. Some tears gently rolled down the cheeks of a few, for they understood that love could never be replaced, only continued and honored. William's story, the story of the Sunset House, does not end here. As his story was shared, many people were captivated by the idea of a space where individuals could find peace, a place where they could share and listen without worrying about societal barriers. And so, the Sunset House spread to other cities, its model naturally expanding. In each place, a rooftop, a wooden chair, and a listening space were created. But even though this model was replicated, the soul of the Sunset House remained unchanged. Each community, despite cultural or environmental differences, preserved the unique elements of the Sunset House. It became a space with no discrimination, no division between the rich and the poor, the successful and the unsuccessful. Everyone could come, sit on the wooden chair, and find a peaceful space to listen and share. The stories from faraway cities, from quiet alleys to bustling places, all carried one common message: love and listening can change the world. That is the message William left behind, one that transcends a house or a city and has spread across the globe. One autumn evening, when the golden leaves began to fall, Emma sat alone on the rooftop. She gazed out towards the horizon, where the sun was slowly setting, its warm golden light casting on her face, making all her worries and sadness seem to fade away. She smiled gently, whispering, "Mr. William, the sky is beautiful today." Though he had passed, moments like this, these peaceful evenings, had become an essential part of her life. Every time she saw the sunset, she remembered him, remembering his words about the importance of simple moments, moments when we can stop, listen, and feel. She sensed that, even though he was no longer here, he still lived in her heart, in the hearts of those around her, in every wooden chair, and in every sunset. She looked up at the sky and felt an unusual peace. That was the gift he had left her, and for everyone, tranquility and the ability to find beauty in the simplest things. In the end, the story closes with an eternal message: some things never die, like the sunset, and how one heart can light up hundreds of lives, just by being heard for one afternoon. What William created will never be lost. Just one afternoon, a wooden chair, a listening space, an open heart, these things can change the world. The memories of him will forever live in the hearts of those who heard his stories, in every wooden chair, in every sunset we gaze at. And as time passes, as we change, the sunset, and hearts that light each other up will never fade. In this turbulent life, we don't always realize the value of simple moments, the small things that bring peace to our souls. Sometimes, quiet afternoons watching the sunset or sitting together sharing life stories are the moments that bring about great change. The story of William and the Sunset House is a living testament to this. When a warm flame is lit from simple things, it can spread power, connect hearts, and change an entire community. Moments like these, if cherished, can bring healing, connection, and the peace we are all seeking. The story of the Sunset House is not just William's story, it is our story as well, the story of those who seek to be heard, understood, and find moments of peace in life. The wooden chairs on the rooftops, the afternoons spent watching the sunset, are not distant images, they are moments we can create in real life. When you sit down, listen to others, when you share a moment of silence, you contribute to creating a space of love and tranquility for yourself and those around you. And now, this story continues, not just in the wooden chairs, but in each heart, in every small action we take for each other. Every day, each person can create their own sunset house, a place where people find peace and deep connection. You can be the one to change, you can be the one to light that flame. Let's continue the journey of sharing warm, inspiring stories. If this story has touched your heart, don't hesitate to share it with those around you. Join our community at Heart Glow to spread love, listening, and small yet powerful actions. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next stories. Together, we will create a world where love and connection never fade. Let Heart Glow light the flame in your heart.